Oscar Piastri got his first feature win at the Hungarian Grand Prix, but thanks to McLaren, it was a little bit messy. And I wanted to talk about that decision and whether it was right or wrong. I'm going to lay out this video in a different way. We're going to talk about it from three aspects before I give my ultimate opinion. Obviously from Oscar's perspective, then from Lando's perspective, and then finally from the team's perspective. So Oscar started P2 and got ahead of Lando down the inside. Lando had his hands full with Max Verstappen on the outside. Piastri had a pretty comfortable lead early on of around 4 seconds for the first half of the race, I'd say. Although it's fair to say that both McLarens probably managing their pace equally early on. So I think Lando could, in theory, have bridged that gap if he wanted to or if he needed to. The gap stayed around 4 seconds in the early part of the race until about lap 40, when it dropped down to 2 seconds. So Oscar had a bit of a messy few laps. He was struggling with back markers. He went off once. So that gap did come down, but then it stayed around 2 seconds. Then on lap 46, Oscar's teammate Lando pitted. Now, I'll talk about why that happened in Lando's section, but from Oscar's perspective, he now knew that Norris was going to undercut him because he was only 1.8 seconds behind. It was actually 2 laps later that Oscar then pitted himself, and as you would expect, Lando got ahead of him. Oscar struggled a little bit in that final stint, I think. He was asked to close up to Lando a few times, but he either couldn't get close to him or he was managing his tyres more than Lando. From the perspective of Oscar Piastri, he was put at a huge disadvantage by his team, leading to him being jumped by his teammate in the pits. So you can understand why he would potentially be frustrated. But what about Lando? What about it from his perspective? Let's brush over the start for a second, where Lando ended up behind Verstappen, who then eventually let him get back past. For the early part of the race, as we know, Lando was running behind his teammate. On lap 17, Lewis Hamilton did an early stop. At that point, Oscar was leading by about 3.3 seconds from Lando, who then pitted the following lap to cover Lewis Hamilton, a lap before Oscar. This is going to be important later because Piastri, while he came out ahead of Lando and no harm was done, this is a narrative that carries forward towards the end of the race. On lap 41, Hamilton pitted again, and McLaren told Lando they're going to need to cover off Hamilton because he was quick on those new hard tyres. So on lap 46, that's what they did. The byproduct of that was that Lando then came out ahead of Piastri. Nothing to do with him though, really. If you think about it, he was told to pit, he did just that. Now a consequence is that he's leading. His argument, and especially on the radio, is that he did what he was told, and if the team didn't want this to happen, they should have pitted Oscar first, and he would have done something different. So what about this from the team perspective? Well, they said they needed to pit Lando to cover off Hamilton, but I actually disagree. The point here is, though, they were at least consistent. They did this on the first stint, and they did it on the second stint. But Lando came out ahead of Lewis by around 4.5 seconds. Not only that, despite the fact that overtaking is hard around Hungary, I think McLaren probably had the pace to get past a Merc if they ended up behind one. But I don't think that was ever going to happen either. I think there was more than enough time in hand to pit Oscar Piastri and then Lando the lap after, and I think they would have both come out ahead of Lewis. Ultimately, I think it was a mistake from the team that's caused this whole scenario, and it was entirely unnecessary. Was Lando in the right or the wrong to move over? I think you're going to get 2 completely different opinions on this, and it's a tough one. I think my opinion when I was watching the race is that he should move over. I think it was the right thing to do. And I don't think I've changed that opinion, but I do see it from another angle this time. From Lando's viewpoint, he's literally done nothing wrong. People have brought up that situation, which I believe was from Hungary, where Hamilton asked Bottas to move out of the way so he could have a run at one of the Ferraris. And he said, listen, if I don't get him, I'll give you the position back. This is different to that. Lando and Piastri didn't cede position to each other on the track. Lando was just doing his own race. He was doing what he was told to do. And then the team have realised that they've messed it up. So they've asked him to give the position back. It's something very, very different. He's just running his own race. Why should he give that position back? The caveat is that McLaren pitted him early to save him from the undercut from Hamilton. They did that for him So they've pitted him early, ruining his teammate so that he would stay ahead of Hamilton. So you could argue they've tried to help him and then he won't help them. That's one way you could look at it. You could ask though as well, they pitted Lando first. Why did they stay out for 2 laps with Oscar? Why not just pit him the lap after? That was also a little bit weird. We all heard the team radio. It was something I've never heard before, and it was almost emotional blackmail, you could say, saying to Lando, listen, you need to move over. It's a team sport. You're going to need Oscar, that sort of thing. Some people say Lando should have held firm because he hadn't done anything wrong, and then he should have held firm and kept position. Others will say he did the right thing because he only got the lead from a tactical decision that the team made to help him in the first place. I firmly believe, though, that again, this was a problem that was blown out of proportion by McLaren, but this time Lando. If Lando just let Oscar through when it was initially asked, if he slowed down and let Oscar through, I think at that point, he would have had enough pace to get back past him. I appreciate the situation with Verstappen and Hamilton hadn't happened then, so there wasn't as much wiggle room to just give up a 3-second gap. So I appreciate that. But if he would have maybe argued less and let him through, I think he'd have had the pace to get back past him. Ultimately, though, he refused for however many laps it was, 10, 15, and then let through Oscar on lap 67. At that point, there was no chance to form a challenge to get back past. I think he could have been the team player, let Oscar through. Okay, we're now status quo. I'm now going to try and overtake him on track. That's not what happened, though. It was McLaren's error. That's why the drivers were in that position to begin with. They didn't need to cause that situation. It was their fault. And some people believe that regardless of how fair it is or fair it isn't, Lando is challenging for a title and he's in the best position. Oscar isn't. And so not finishing first and giving up 7 points could bite them in the arse later in the season. Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next week for Spa. Wait, hold on. It's this week. Spa's this week. See ya.